Okay. Well, hello, everybody. This is Debbie Neely, founder of 2911 Group. And I'm here again for our love series. I love the love series, right? I just love saying it. And our love series is all about loving yourself, love others, and love God. And so we talk about relevant topics, important topics, I feel like, for not just our young women audience, definitely for them, but also for people out there who support young women have that opportunity to have an impact on their life. So I'm very excited today with my guests. I always love talking to Hayley. Hayley is our guest today, Miss Hayley Becker. And Hayley is here today. Hayley's had a big past year. So she got her master's in school counseling from James Madison University. So she's been doing lots of great things. So to get your master's, you had to spend time in schools and do a lot of studying and a lot of stuff to get your master's. So she's had a big accomplishment this year for sure. And she's kind of in a transition period, which I think a lot of people out there can relate to these days. But the other thing about Hayley is she's a young woman, which is why I love her being willing to talk about this topic. Is she's maybe has gone through some things or is going through some things. Yeah, that's why I wanted to mention your transition, because a lot of times when we're going through transition, that's when we really can feel alone and we can really feel confused and not sure. Excitement, but it can also be a little bit of anxiety around the unknown of what lies ahead. So I invited Hayley today. She was very, very accommodating and was like, yes, I want to talk about this topic. So thanks for being here, Hayley.
Sure.
So our topic that we're going to talk about today, I'm calling it You Are Not Alone, because I think that's the message I really want people to take away from our time today. But let's start with you. School counseling is something very specific, and I feel like it almost has to be driven by a passion for something. So tell us a little bit about why did you study school counseling?
So when I went to college, I didn't originally plan on being a school counselor. I had gone in as a communications major, thought I would work in a big city, be a big hotshot. But once I got into that, I realized that I just wasn't really passionate about it. But I loved being in the schools and working with kids. I'd done a lot of camps and youth group stuff growing up. And actually my high school guidance counselor was incredible and definitely really shaped my high school career. And we continued to have a very close relationship even post high school. So when I was in college and I just wasn't loving my major, I kind of called my mom one day and had a mini freak out and was like, I think I need to go to grad school. I think I need to be a school counselor. And thankfully she was very supportive. So that's kind of how it came about for me. And I am very grateful that I made that change, because it's definitely more my calling and I'm way more passionate about it.
So what do you love about it?
I have, like I said, I always loved the structure of school. But when I would substitute teach, I kind of thought to myself, like, I really don't care what these kids are learning. I care how they feel, and I care how I make them feel. And so that's kind of what made me realize I need to focus more on the counseling side of being in school, and helping kids with the things that they go through to help them academically. Because you can't succeed academically if you're not succeeding in your own personal well-being. So that's what I love about it, is helping the kids with their personal well-being.
I love that, because you have to help the whole person. You can't just help one little piece of their life, right? It has to be about the whole person that you're dealing with.
Yes, absolutely.
So Hayley, for our statistics numbers people out there, I did a little research for what we're going to talk about today. So that's why I'm going to look at my notes and read this. And what I found out was it said after accidental deaths, suicide is the second leading cause of death in those between the ages of 10 and 19 years, which just hurts my heart. Historically, suicide rates have been higher for male than for female youth. However, recent data released by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention suggests that pattern is changing. So Hayley, I'm sure this is like a hot topic that you guys probably talked about in your school and maybe even that you saw in some of your training. So tell us a little bit from your perspective, why do you believe that anxiety, depression, self-harm, which we hear a lot about in young women, and even suicide has increased for young women in recent years?
Well, if you think about it, our world has completely changed with the rise of technology and everything that happened with the COVID-19 pandemic. Isolation has been huge in teens and even young kids. Um, in my internship experience, I was at an elementary school and we came across kids at the elementary level that were considering suicide, which is terrifying. But I do think that the world has changed a lot since maybe you were a kid or even when I was a kid. And there's a lot more danger and a lot more like I don't know how to say this. There's a lot more variables, I guess. It's not as simple. It's very complex being a kid or a teen in our world today. And I think that has really contributed to the rise in mental health issues and all of that stuff, unfortunately.
So it feels like this is more important than ever. And, you know, sometimes some people say, oh, we're just talking about it more, but it really does feel like more people are struggling, and not just struggling, but actually going through with hurting themselves. And I feel like society plays a role in this, right? All of us, not just people who have young women in their lives. You know, the pressure that society puts on, the rules, the expectations that we place on young women today. So how can we as members of society really help young women see their worth and understand that they're not alone and that they bring a lot of value to the world?
Yeah. And this is actually probably one of the most important things that I would share is the best thing that you can do to protect a child from all of these things is to help build their self-esteem. Because a child who is secure in who they are and what they believe isn't likely to fall into things that will tempt them for danger, like drugs, alcohol, or any of those types of things. And it'll also arm them against these dark thoughts or any of these mental illnesses that they might experience. And it'll also give them confidence to reach out for help if they need it. Because that's a lot of the problem too, is these kids are going through these things alone, completely isolated and not reaching out for help or not knowing what resources are out there. So the best thing that you can do if you're mentoring somebody in your life is to build up their self-esteem at any opportunity that you can. And there's plenty of different ways that you can do this. Getting kids involved in activities. That was part of the problem with COVID is everything shut down and these kids had nothing to do. They weren't socializing. They had no creative output. They had nothing to really work for, no goals or anything. And it really made them isolated and made them feel really dark on the inside, I feel like. So getting these kids out and about doing things that they're passionate about and supporting them in those endeavors. So not just dropping them off at practice, but maybe stick around for a couple of minutes, or when you're in the car ride home, say, hey, like I really liked when this happened, or I saw you did this really cool thing in your singing lesson or whatever. All of those things will help build up that child's self-esteem. They'll be more secure in who they are and more likely to be better prepared when they encounter any of these struggles.
I like that you talked about giving specifics, because sometimes we'll say, oh, you're so good, you're such a good person, or you're so good at that. But we don't always tell people like specifically what is it that they're doing that is so good, and what is the impact that has on like the ripple effect, right, on them or other people or a group. Or what I always tell people is not just about what people do, it's also about who they are. Like being able to tell somebody like you're always so kind. Like when we go to places, you're so kind to people, right? And being specific about their character and who they are and acknowledging that as well.
Yeah. And the other thing is consistency as well. Because a lot of times these kids don't have consistent adults in their life that are building up their self-esteem. Like maybe they come from a broken home or something. And so what they tell us is that's really our job, is to be there, to be consistent, and to constantly be that positive person in their life, building them up, making them feel good about themselves, because they might not be getting that at home. So as long as you can like be there and be positive, be supportive, that would really help kids that are struggling.
Yeah, I've read so many articles about how helping other people can build your own self-esteem. So random acts of kindness, or it doesn't have to be random, just acts of kindness. You can know the person that you're doing something
right.
Right. But when you feel like you're contributing and you're helping someone else, it definitely makes you feel good and it builds your own self-esteem.
Absolutely. And I think that's why people enjoy being school counselors, because it's not like we get paid the best salary in the world, but it does really make you feel good when you see a kid do a complete 180 from the beginning of the school year to the end because of the consistent pouring of love into that child. And it's not even just me, it should be the whole school community, the teachers, the administrators, the staff, like even the custodians. So it's super important, coaches, all that type of stuff.
Yeah. So it's funny because you kind of went there, and this is a question I didn't prepare you for. But can you talk a little bit about who helped build your self-esteem, like from your experience? Because you're in your 20s now, right? So now you have that opportunity where you can reflect and look back a little bit. So who were some of those people that maybe, I mean, you mentioned your mom. So maybe people wouldn't think of, oh, that's somebody that I want to make sure is in my child's life or is part of their, their community that's helping to raise my child.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I can think of plenty of people, but thankfully I came from a great family. Obviously, you, my aunt, I have great aunts and uncles and cousins and everything that have supported me through everything, came to all my plays and sports events and stuff growing up and was just very, very supportive. But even, like I said, my high school counselor, she definitely built my self-esteem up a lot. Teachers that I had growing up that I could just tell really believed in me and really saw something special in me. And even if it's just something as small as like, oh, I know this kid really likes this thing and I saw it and it made me think of them and I want to share that with them. And just to say to that kid or that teen, like, hey, I know you really like X. When I was out, I saw X and I thought of you and it made me happy because blah, 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 or whatever it is. Those little nuggets, kids and teens hold on to that. They love that type of stuff. Like it makes them feel like, wow, I'm special, I'm worthy. And that's all anyone wants to feel, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because one of the things I talk to about with people that I coach is, what are you known for, right? Because even when you're a young person, you're building your personal brand, so to think about when people think of me, what do they think of? What am I known for? Or what do I want to be known for? And then I need to show up that way. I need to act that way, right? I think that's a great helpful mindset for people, is to say, hey, I want to be known for this. So I need to act a certain way or be a certain way.
Right. Exactly.
The other thing I want to mention real quick that you said earlier, Hayley, that I think is super important is the asking for help. And I think that's one of the things around societal maybe expectations or rules, is that we don't ask for help, that we don't let people know that we're struggling or that we need help, or we don't know something, that we're supposed to just suck it up and push through. And I think COVID really brought that home for a lot of people, of you don't have to just shove your feelings down and try to move on. Right. So can you talk a little bit more about that, about the asking for help and maybe some of the things that people have in their head that they think, I'm supposed to be this way, but it's okay if you're not?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, asking for help is huge, but it is extremely hard for kids and teens. And that's why it is so important to have a relationship with a safe adult. It doesn't have to be your parents. It could be your coach. It could be your teacher. It could be even like a mentor that you have that is in the community, maybe like a volunteer at 2911 that you met when you went to the conference and you just had a connection with them. As long as you have somebody safe in your life that you can trust, that would support you and you could talk to and go to, is what's most important. And if you are that safe adult, my best advice is if a teen or a kid is coming to you and they're sharing maybe some concerning things, remain calm and just listen to them. The best thing that you can say to someone who is suicidal is, I'm so glad you told me. Thank you for sharing your story. That's the best thing that you can say to someone. Don't put pressure on them that they need to share. Don't put pressure on them that they're in danger or there's something wrong or there's something bad about them, the best thing that you can do is to just completely make them feel heard and validated, for sure.
I love that. That's all that's what all of us want at the end of the day, right? Is to feel like we were seen and heard.
Yeah. And I know it can be kind of scary when somebody tells you something like that, or it doesn't even have to be suicidal. If someone says like, I'm super anxious, or I'm depressed, I can't get out of bed, or any of these like really heavy, like sad, hard things, especially if you care about that person, it can be very intimidating and scary to hear those things. But the best thing to do is to just remain calm and just let them pour their heart out to you, because they're in so much pain and they really need someone to be there for you or there for them and just to listen to them. But also another thing, sorry, I'm kind of going off on tangents. Sometimes teens might like do what I like to call a trickle, where they'll just like drop a little bit, like, oh, I can't sleep at night. Ha 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 ha. And they just laugh it off. Like, what you could say is, oh, tell me more about that. Like, you don't have to pressure them, or what does that mean? And that way they will slowly start to open up more. And that's like their little trickles. That's them asking for help, but they're not asking, like, oh, I just like, I feel like I can't like go out anymore. Or, oh, like, I have no friends. Like, that's them kind of baiting you. Like, I'm upset about this, or I'm insecure about this, or this is something hard that I'm going through, but it's not that big a deal. Like, I'm just so zany and funny or whatever. But there's truth underneath them trying to laugh off what they're going through. So yeah, that's the best thing also that you can do is notice those little trickles of what they're trying to say to you.
Okay, that's good. It's a little bit like taking in the clues, right?
Yes.
And doing the listening, and then kind of deciding what would be the best approach.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a little bit about friends, and while before we move off the self-esteem and the self-worth topic, can you share a little bit about your friends group? Because we talk about this a lot, like who you surround yourself with is really, really important. And that could change throughout your life, right? Who you hang out with when you're 10 may not be who you hang out with when you're 15, right? So can you talk a little bit about your friends group, like your group of people that you hang around with, and how that might help with self-esteem and self-worth?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is actually, I can give a great example. Like, I would call myself a nomadic friend. I've had friends throughout my whole life, but I wouldn't say I've had the same friend from when I was like 5 to now. I've pretty much every stage of life that I've been in, I've moved into a new friend group. So I think for me, that, let's see, what am I trying to say here? I've moved through different stages of friends, but I've always kind of had a group of friends, and I'm not saying that I was perfect in my choosing. I definitely had some friends that were there for me and have been incredible, and some friends not so much. And it's especially hard when you're young because you don't really know 100% what a good friend looks like or what you want or need from a friend, because it's different for each person. Some people are needy and need someone to call them all the time, and that's what makes them feel loved, and that's important and really great. Other people like me just check up on me like once every like couple months and we're good. Like, that's how me and my best friend Margot are. We met my freshman year of college, and we literally only lived together 1 year, but we still stay in touch, and I still consider her my best friend, because for me, I don't need someone to check up on me. I need someone to be there for me when it counts. And she's always been there for me when it counts. And so that's why we have a great friendship. And then you look at my sister, who's had her best friend Lily since she literally moved into our neighborhood when we were little kids, and they're still extremely close now to this day. So I think it really depends on you and your personality, but it's definitely important to have friends. Your friends are the go-between, like the safe adults and being completely alone. It's very important to have people there to support you in those moments where you feel vulnerable and you're just with your peers,
Yeah. And it's nice to have someone just every once in a while tells you you're not crazy, right? When you're like,
Right.
this is how I'm feeling. They're like, I feel that way too. Like you're
Right.
okay.
Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
okay.
And as much as, it is important to have a safe adult in your life, the adult is in a completely different life stage and has a completely different outlook than you, the teenager. So to have a friend that is there and supportive and willing to be there for you on your hardest days is incredibly important.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love what you just said because I think it goes back to there's no one way to do all this stuff, right? It's what fits for you, what works for you. So it may be that you have that friend that you've had since you were in kindergarten, or it may be that you have friends that kind of move in and out of your life, or the friends that you can connect back with every year and it feels like you were just with them, right?
Right. Right. And I love that saying about, God puts people in your life for a reason,
Mhm.
and he puts people in your life at a certain time for a reason. So, for example, I had a friend in middle school, and we didn't know each other in elementary school, kind of like connected very close over like a year. And she told me she was suicidal over text. And I remember it clearly, everything. And I remember talking to her the whole night about it. I remember talking, like asking her how she felt, and we worked through it all. And I remember asking her if she would go with me to the school counselor the next day. And so the next day when we came to school, I looked at her, I said, it's time, like we're going to go and we're going to talk to someone. And so we went up to the teacher and I was like, we need to talk to the school counselor. And I think the teacher like kind of gave me a weird look, and I was just like, it's an emergency. Like I just, for whatever reason, just really wanted her to get help because I knew she needed it. And so, yeah, we went to the school counselor and we talked it all out. And she actually ended up transferring schools. And we're like Facebook friends, but we're not super close. And actually, after that year, we really didn't even stay in touch. But in that moment, God had put me in her life to be there for her. And so, if you're struggling or if you feel alone, there's somebody in your life that God is reaching out with through. There's somebody in your life that God is pouring into and it is trying to help you and extend that hand. And they may not be, again, they may be your best friend from when you were 5, or they may just be someone you met that year. You never know.
Yeah, that's a great message. She has a way of doing that, right? Putting people
Yeah.
in our lives at the right time when we need them. So tell us a little bit, you've talked a little bit about this, but what are some more signs that would tell us that maybe someone's in trouble, that maybe we need to keep an eye on them, or maybe ask them some questions, or maybe encourage them to get help? So what are some of the signs we should be looking for, Hayley?
Yeah. So for teens and kids, it's definitely like they'll throw stuff out there like, oh, I just want this all to end, or I just want this to be over. Sometimes they have a plan. Like they'll just say like, oh, we'll just take a bunch of pills, or, oh, I just want to jump off my roof. Like sometimes like those little things, grab onto those because those are outpours of help. Like they're trying to get help. But also any changes like in diet, mood, isolation, like they had a group of friends and then all of a sudden they don't have any. Also major physical changes, like if somebody goes and just cuts their hair all of a sudden or dyes it. These are all like very common signs of people kind of on like their last like ditch effort, I guess, to feel some sort of normalcy or some pull to why I should be here. So those are some of the signs that you could look for as a friend or as an adult, that are in teens and kids.
Okay. And so when you said little things, like someone said, I'm going to jump off the roof, may not sound like a little thing, but sometimes we think, oh, they're just kidding, or they're just,
Yeah.
they're
Because
just being
honestly,
dramatic,
yes.
right? That
Yeah,
that
because
type of thing.
that age you're saying things for shock value. You're trying to get that attention because that's the developmental stage that you're in. And so, you don't necessarily have to think like, oh, they actually are going to go home and jump off the roof, but what's underneath that? Like, what are you trying to say? Are you just trying to get my attention, or are you reaching out for help?
Mm-hmm. So how do we know the difference? How do we know when they're just going through it? Because we've all had those phases. I mean, let's preach to the choir, right? We've all had those phases where life's been hard, or we didn't want to come out of our room, or we didn't want to go to school because something happened, right? I mean, we've all had that time, and some of us can get through that and some of us can't. So how do we know when someone's just kind of going through something and we just need to keep our eye on them? And how do we know when it's like, this is more than that?
That's a great question. And I would just say it's all about the relationship that you have with that person. It's important that you are asking those follow-up questions. Well, what do you mean by that? Or tell me more about that. And I think once you ask those things, and the more that comes out, the truth will be revealed. But also it's important to know that it is completely okay to ask someone, are you suicidal? When we got our suicide training in my master's degree, we did this thing called the assist training. And that's the first thing that they tell you to do is if you encounter someone, whether it's a stranger or a friend, and you think that there's a concern and you think that they might be suicidal, ask them straight up, are you suicidal? Because it kind of takes the elephant out of the room. Like, they don't have to say it. If they're thinking it and they're feeling it, then they can kind of like have that relief, like, you know what? Yeah, I am. And then immediately after if they say, yes, I am suicidal, or yeah, I am feeling that way, immediately, I'm so glad you told me. I'm so glad you told me. Because then that reassures and revalidates them that, like, wow, somebody is here for me. Somebody does want to hear my story. Somebody does care about me. And then the follow-up from that, I'm so glad that you told me, like, can you tell me why you've been feeling this way? Then they can go into their story, how they got to this point. And then the best thing you can say after that is, like, thank you for sharing. Like, I can't imagine what you're going through, any of that, like, empathetic stuff. And you can ask, is there a way we can make a plan to keep you safe for now? The for now part is especially important, because anything like for tonight, for the next 6 months, like, that's too abstract. That's too much time for somebody who's in crisis. Just asking them, like, how can we make a plan to keep you safe for now, is very helpful, because sometimes, like, when they're at that point and they are suicidal, they have a plan. Like, they know what they're going to do when they get home from school. They're going to do X, Y, Z. And so if you're a friend or if you're a mentor and they share with you that they have a plan, and this is why they're feeling suicidal, or this is why they're feeling so deep and down, try and figure out what we can do, what safeguards we can put in place for now. And that will help them.
Okay, no, that's great. I like the language thing, because language is important, right?
Yeah.
Especially if someone's in crisis, what they hear, you know, your intention and what they hear, you want to make sure that those match up for sure. So anything else? You mentioned some great tips already. If we're kind of seeing some signs of what we can do, whether it's just to kind of pick up on the clues, ask some questions, keep an eye on them, or if it's gotten to the point where we're like, I need to ask, are you suicidal? And then what do I do from there? Anything else that you think would be good to share around if we see some signs, what's the best thing to do?
Yeah. Also, get them into with a counselor. At this point, you know, I think our society has done a lot better in the most recent years on destigmatizing mental health. And I think a lot of people have been sharing their story, which is amazing. And I think a lot of people are opening up more about mental health. But we're not perfect. It's still not 100% accepted and understood, really, in a lot of households. And so if you do have a great relationship with the person that is, even if they're not suicidal, if they're just struggling mentally, get them in with a counselor, or at least try to get them in with a counselor. A lot of counselors accept insurance. So if they have insurance, there are also a lot of counselors accept Medicaid and Medicare. So it is tough, because this is a little abstract, but systemically, like, mental health can be a little difficult to access. And so that's something that as counselors we're working on in the field is getting people more connected with services that need them, despite whatever economic status they are. But you don't have to worry about that as a mentor or a friend that has someone struggling. Just even suggesting like, hey, maybe you should talk to someone. Maybe that would help. You never know. And if they say no, then that's fine. You don't have to push it. But they might come around. So definitely don't be afraid, just offering them help.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's funny because I think in the past, if you said I'm going to see a counselor or something like that, you're right. I think people would worry about, well, what do other people think of me if they know that, if they know I'm doing that. But it seems like a lot of people now are like, I see a counselor just so I can talk, or that person asks me questions. They help me think through things. I can get things out of my head and then I can decide what I'm going to do with it. And, so it does feel like it's becoming less stigmatized, where people worry about what are other people going to think of me if I do this, I'm sure it doesn't hurt. I think the whole Simone Biles thing with the Olympics was a great example of knowing she knew herself, she knew something was wrong, and she stood up for herself and said, I'm not to the pressure, and said, I'm not going to do this. This isn't the best thing for me, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's where that self-esteem comes right back in. Like, if you know yourself and you know your mind, your body, your soul, you know what you need. And sometimes that's a counselor, sometimes that's medication, sometimes that's inpatient treatment, who knows what it is. But it's so important to go and get that professional help if you're at that stage and you're ready for that stage.
Yeah, and we're all different, so what we may need is going to be different for everybody.
Right.
So Hayley, so impressive. You're like a wealth of knowledge here.
Oh, thank you.
So what message would you want to leave with our audience? I'll give you your last word.
Yeah. So I heard a quote at this conference that I went to. This is more specific to school, but the most painful school experience is isolation. And that really, that point really hit home with me. Because if you think about the kids that are struggling and the kids that are having a hard time in school, it's because they're isolated. And we just went through 2 years of physical and mental and emotional isolation. And so we're going to see a lot more of these mental health issues in the upcoming years. And so my best tip and advice is surround yourself with positive people. Get people in your life that care about you, that support you. You're not alone, like we've been saying at the beginning and throughout all of this. The best way to combat mental health issues is to find people in your life, a supportive adult, supportive peers that care about you, love you, and validate you and make you feel heard and understood.
Yeah, awesome. And that could be 1 or 2 people, or it could be 12 people, right? Again,
exactly.
It's all up to you and what works for you.
And it could change over your lifetime, and that's okay.
Yeah. All right. Great message. So thank you again, Hayley. It's a really important topic. Don't forget, everyone, you are not alone. Check out our other videos on YouTube in our love series. We have a lot of really good videos. Number 3. So we're just getting started with our love series. We have a website. We're on Facebook and LinkedIn, 2911 group, if you'd like to follow us. And again, you are not alone, and 2911 loves you. Thank you.
Yes.